Hello everybody and welcome back to Sumatra on Bass. I often get asked the question between a Squier entry-level bass and a Fender USA bass, is there that much difference that the price difference is relative to the difference in quality? That's a difficult question to answer. I know that the entry-level instruments these days have come a long way from where they were 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. These days, an entry-level instrument from a respectable manufacturer is actually quite good. And you all know this Squier jazz bass that I've been using both in the studio and live. I've upgraded it with EMG pickups. The bass was sub $300, the pickups were about the same, so the pickups are almost as much as the bass. But for under $600, it's quite a workhorse jazz bass, and it's got a great sound. Now, comparing this to a USA Deluxe jazz bass, you would say, okay, it's got noiseless pickups and an active circuit, but is that all worth that much more money? Now, there are things at play here that you can see and things that you cannot see. And the only way to answer this question is to run through some of the differences that are obvious and the others that are really not visible when you look at the bass, and try and gauge from there whether the difference in price, say if we just take the stock bass, which the stock pickups are fine, at $300, and something like this, which is closer to $3,500, we're looking at 10 times the price, let's say. Is this a 10 times better instrument than the Squier? Well, this is what we're about to find out. So the Squier jazz bass, it has an alder body, a maple neck, a rosewood fingerboard, your standard open gear tuners, and that's nice, somebody's beeping outside, a bent plate bridge, volume and tone control, and that's pretty much standard fare for any jazz bass. The neck is quite good. It's been reliable for a couple of years now. What else can I tell you about it? It's, it just needs a little bit of setup when you get it because of seasonal changes. But on this one, the nut was very well cut. The setup was pretty good. I did some tweaks to it. I changed the pickups. Let's just have a quick listen to the sound. It's going through the radial stage bug DI, so there's no preamp or anything else, no EQ applied on the desk. So you can see there being, there's going through the desk and it's totally flat. It gets all those jazz bass sounds, the front pickup, the back pickup, the slap tone that jazz basses are so good at. And the playability is very good, as we've discussed before. So now let's have a listen to the American Deluxe and let's see if we can hear that much difference in sound. Okay, so this is a 2012, I think it is, American Deluxe Jazz Bass 5. And it doesn't matter that it's got a B string, we'll just ignore that in this comparison. But this has an ash body, a maple neck and a maple fretboard. And again, it's just your regular jazz bass pickups. These are noiseless versions. I think they're N3. There's newer ones than that, or newer models. This was replaced by, I think, the Elite and now by the Ultra, but they're very similar. This has a high mass bridge. The tuners are ultralights, and that helps a bit with balance. Being that it's ash body and maple fretboard, it's got a little bit more brightness and snap, and it has an active passive switch here. And I'll start it off in active mode, both pickups on, and the tone wide open. And now we'll switch it to active mode and it'll get a little bit louder. So again, as you'd expect, it sounds like a jazz bass. In active mode, of course, it picks up a little bit of gain. And these tone controls, there's on top of this passive tone, there is a mid control for active. There's a stacked bass and treble, pickup balance rather than two volumes, and your master volume. Let's just have a listen to a few of the active sounds and see how we feel about that. So you can hear there's quite a bit of range in the preamp. It's got the mid control, it's got the bass, it's got the treble, and you can dial in different tones. The Squier at the moment, of course, has a passive style tone roll-off, which is okay. I find that quite adequate because I've got enough EQ on my amp to compensate for a lot of things anyway. Now, they both sound like jazz basses. So where do we find the difference in the price? Well, let's have a little talk about that. So this bass is made in the USA. This Squier is made in China. And either one I would take to a gig. And in fact, because I've gone back to 4-string for a lot of the stuff we do now, I've been using this Squier quite a lot. I've had no problems with it at all. It sounds great, night after night, no problem. The strings on this 5-string are slightly different. These ones are stainless steel and these ones are nickel plated. So they're not quite as bright, but notwithstanding, I suppose where we should start with the difference in price is that being made in China, the labour rate in China is, compared to the US, quite a bit cheaper. So it costs you less in labour to make this. In the US, the pay rates are higher. So, and this bass, I'll explain why in a minute, has a lot more hours of labour put into it. And that comes at a premium and that adds to the cost. So we're kind of adding a lot to the cost in hours and a lot to it in the hourly rate, okay? So this is plain and simple. A jazz bass, as I said, alder body. If you have a close look at the maple on the neck, it's a pretty good piece of maple, and I don't know how this translates to the camera, but I can tell you that I can see cathedrals in the grain, and it's not quite as straight grained as it could be. But of course, you wouldn't expect that on an instrument of this price. It's got your standard 4-hole neck to body join, and just some standard tuners. The fretwork is quite good. The fretboard is quite even. You can get the action quite low, no problem at all. Everything seems to work just fine. Now let's check some of these differences in the USA. As I said, it's an ash body. Ash is not that much more expensive than alder. It's still maple in the neck, maple fingerboard, no real differences there. Now, obviously it has active electronics. It has a high mass bridge. These two items will add something to the cost. It's got a nice easy access to the truss rod here via a small route, and you use a T. What's going on tonight? There's so many sirens going on. A hex key to adjust it. If I look at the grain on this, it just seems more dense and it just seems straighter grained than the other one. The tuners are ultralights. This helps with balance. The neck plate is a 5-bolt arrangement. Let me just flip this over this way. And you can see it's beveled on this lower side, so it's easier to access the upper frets. Speaking of the frets, this has a bound edge on the fingerboard, so you never feel a fret edge, but also, and again, I don't know how good this translates to the camera, but the frets are rounded both over the edge of the fret and around the bottom part. So they feel very, very rounded, very broken in. So when you're running your hand up and down the fretboard here, it actually feels very, very smooth. And these are the things that you can see quickly. Now, some of the things that you cannot see, the treble side of the neck here is thinner than the bass side. So it's an asymmetrical neck, and when your thumb is on the back of it and you're moving up and down, it gives it a very, very comfortable feel when you're reaching, especially down for the B string here. You have a much more comfortable feel than if it was symmetrical. The other things that you don't see is either side of the truss rod, which is in the middle of the neck, there's 2 carbon fibre rods sitting either side of that. And that actually is quite a big deal, because I've left both of these now for a couple of months and the season's changed here. The Squier needed quite a bit of adjustment to get it back to where I would like it. This needed a retune, but actually no adjustment at all. And I noticed that even with big changes, it barely requires an eighth of a turn of the truss. So that neck is very, very stable. So if you're on the road a lot, if you're traveling, that's an important thing, because you may be going from country to country or state to state, or north to south, and the air changes, the humidity, the temperature, and that all affects the neck. So the less adjustment you have to make, the better it is, and it's just one less thing to worry about, right? The other things are, you can string this through the bridge or through the body. It has two 9-volt batteries, so it's an 18-volt circuit. It comes with the strap locks. I'm pretty sure it came with these, yeah. And what else can I tell you about it? The finish is very nice, outstanding. This looks like it's actually very, very clever joining them, but it's only 2 pieces of wood. And mind you, so is that. That's 2 pieces of wood also. But the joinery on this it's very hard to tell where the wood changes. You've got to look at it carefully. And because of things like the ultralights, it's very balanced. The action on this, you can get it really, really low. You can get the neck really quite straight. The B string rings nice and clear. There's little things like this sort of hidden B string retainer that the string goes through. It's a stealthy retainer for the B string. And I've used this on a lot of shows, and it's a great playing and sounding bass, very comfortable for a 5-string especially. So that extra labour in channeling for these extra rods to go in the neck, doing the inlays, doing the binding, doing the fretwork, you could say would take considerably longer to build than the Squier, which has none of those things. So at the end of the day, this is where the price difference is, and obviously, I suppose, being a Fender product, they're probably charging a little bit of a premium for it too. They've got to sustain a company. A company has to be profitable. So you would say to yourself, would you choose one over the other? Well, for me, I gig both of these basses, and I'm sort of equally happy with both of them. This one goes to the more serious gigs where I need a 5-string, where I need more EQ options because we're doing a lot of different types of music, where I can go from active to passive if I need to, and that's a great feature. If the batteries die, you can always switch over to passive. As I said, fit and finish and the feel is superb. So it's a great bass. Now, is it 10 times better? No. The law of diminishing returns applies here, and we say that while it is markedly better, it is not going to be 10 times better. If this was made in China, it would probably be a lot less in price because of the labor content, right? Now, how much less, I don't know exactly. I haven't really done the math, and I don't really know the rates. But when people ask the question, well, should I spend that much money? And entirely the answer to that question ultimately is up to you. If you go and try, say, both of these, and you say, well, you know what? I just really like the sound and the feel of this. I really can't do without it, and you can afford it. That's all well and good. If you can't, the Squier is a great little platform for starting you off. It's a great little platform for modifying with different pickups, electronics, bridges. You can upgrade the tuners if you want to, although they work quite well. and that will get you in to playing at a much lower price. Now, after a few years of gigging, you may want to then upgrade to something like the USA, and or somewhere in the middle, any of the made in Mexico jazz basses. But at the end of the day, they both sound like jazz basses. They both play really, really well. So, as I said, it's an entirely personal choice from there. You can't really go wrong with probably any of these, or either of these two, or the Mexican one, or anything in the middle between them. It's nice to have that little bit of extra onboard EQ because you can make little changes on the fly without having to turn back to your amp, which sometimes could be way back there, you know, next to the drum riser. So, in closing, I would say both very good instruments, and I stand by that because I use both of them on professional gigs. The Squier, obviously, it has less of those tiny little things that make incrementally small differences in the playability and feel. It's still a great jazz bass. This is better, but not 10 times better. And I would just go on the fact that either I need to tweak that EQ on the fly, and do I need a 5-string, or this is just a very simple gig where I'm sort of playing a lot of Root 5 stuff. I don't really change the tone. I will take this. If it was somewhere where I feel the equipment is unsafe or it might get stolen, I would probably take this because it's easier to replace than this one, and so on and so forth. So I encourage you to really go out, if you're looking for a jazz bass in particular, go out and try a few. And don't be afraid, if you're really serious about buying, to ask the people at the store to make some truss rod adjustments to get it better into your feel. And if I was really, really close to buying something, I would even purchase a set of strings and say, pop these strings on for me. And if I feel happy with it, I'll take it. That just costs you one set of strings, which I know these days are not cheap, but it's cheaper than making a mistake and buying the wrong bass. So yeah, go out and try them, and let me know in the comments what you play and what you think of either one of these types of basses, and your experiences with them, because this is, again, just my opinion. I don't have any affiliation with any company at all. So I just, on this channel, I just basically speak my mind, and again, my opinion is my opinion only. So it may not apply to you. You may have a totally different opinion, and hey, that's fine. I'm just telling you what I've found. You can tell me what you found, and we can compare notes. So, as ever, thank you so very much for spending this time with me. I hope you found this interesting. We're coming up to the holiday season. I don't know whether we'll get to do another video before then. We have a few things lined up. Probably will come in the new year. So unless I see you all before, happy holidays, stay safe, have a great time, enjoy the time with the friends and family and away from work. Keep making music, keep having fun, and I will see you all in the new year. Thank you very much.